What happens when one of Hollywood's most admired icons, a man known for his grace, discipline, and quiet authority, is pushed past his limit on live television? That man was Denzel Washington, sitting across from Michael Strahan on Good Morning America, expecting a conversation about legacy, but walking straight into an ambush. And what unfolded that morning wasn't just a celebrity interview gone wrong. It was one of the most intense confrontations morning TV had ever seen. Because this wasn't just a heated argument. This was a moment where respect was tested, pride was exposed, and dignity stood its ground. A moment that reminded the world that silence, when wielded by the right man, can be louder than rage. The morning lights of Good Morning America were almost blinding when Denzel Washington stepped onto the stage. He moved with that same quiet confidence that had defined him for decades. No grand gestures, no forced charm, just calm, steady presence. Michael Strahan met him halfway, his grin wide, his handshake firm, his energy over the top, as if he was trying to match Denzel's legend with his own enthusiasm. Denzel, the man, the myth, the legend, Michael said, laughing too loudly. Denzel smiled, polite but measured. "Good to be here, man," he replied, voice smooth and low. But there was something in Michael's tone, a kind of performative excitement that didn't sound real. They sat down, and the atmosphere seemed relaxed at first. Michael leaned forward with that familiar charm, flipping through his note cards like a man who'd done this 1,000 times. "Let's start simple," he said, smiling. "Your new movie, people are calling it your best work in years. What drew you to the role?" Denzel nodded, taking a brief moment before answering. "It's about purpose," he said. "It's about a man who refuses to let the world tell him he's done." His tone was thoughtful, his eyes steady on Michael. The audience hung on every word. Michael laughed softly, saying, "Well, you've certainly had one incredible run. 2 Oscars, decades of greatness. I mean, what's left for Denzel Washington to prove, right?" Denzel chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here because I still love the work." For a second, it felt like just another interview. Smooth, professional, respectful. But then Michael leaned back in his chair, his grin tightening into something smaller, sharper. The air changed. "Denzel," he began again, voice lighter but loaded. "You've had a great run, man. But let's be real. When does great become greedy?" The laughter that followed was awkward. Some people smiled out of habit, unsure if it was a joke. Others froze, eyes darting between the two men. The question landed like a slap disguised as a compliment. Denzel didn't laugh. He didn't flinch either. He just stared at Michael, that polite smile fading slowly from his face. For a few seconds, you could hear the hum of the studio lights. Michael tried to fill the silence, tapping his note cards with a grin that looked more like a defense mechanism. "I'm just saying," he continued, "you've been doing this forever. Hollywood's changing. Younger stars are coming up. Don't you ever think about stepping back, letting them shine?" Denzel leaned slightly forward, his eyes narrowing just enough to be noticed. His voice dropped an octave, soft but suddenly carrying a weight that made the whole room feel smaller. "You asking me if I've had my turn, Michael?" The way he said it wasn't angry, but it carried something heavier, something that warned, "Don't go further unless you're ready for what comes next." Michael blinked, still smiling, but now it looked forced. "I'm just saying what people are thinking," he said, trying to laugh it off. But nobody was laughing anymore. The audience could sense it, the tension, the line that had just been crossed. Michael shuffled his cards again, pretending to look for his next question, but the smirk on his face said he already knew what he was about to do. He leaned back, eyes narrowing just slightly, like a man preparing to throw a punch he thought would land clean. "You're almost 70, right?" he asked casually, though his tone carried an edge. "Isn't it time to give someone else a shot?" The words dropped into the air like a grenade. The studio went dead quiet. Even the faint hum of the lights seemed to pause. Denzel didn't move, didn't blink. His calm was unsettling, the kind of calm that comes right before thunder. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and deliberate. "You mean someone younger," he said, pausing just long enough to make everyone lean forward, "or someone safer?" Michael tried to laugh, but it came out nervous. No, man. I just mean, Hollywood's changing. Audiences want new energy, fresh perspectives. Denzel cut in softly, but his words sliced through the noise. You think age cancels talent? His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. Let me tell you something, Michael. I don't take anyone's shot. I just don't miss mine. The audience didn't clap. They just stared, sensing that whatever was happening wasn't entertainment anymore. It was personal. Michael looked rattled, his smile twitching like he wanted to backpedal, but couldn't find the way out. I didn't mean it like that, he said, voice suddenly tight. Denzel leaned back, still watching him, every movement measured. Sure you did, he said quietly. And that's fine. Just be ready for the answer you get when you ask a disrespectful question. The tension was so thick, it felt like no one could breathe. Michael let out a shaky laugh, the kind that tries to sound casual but lands somewhere between nervous and defensive. You're old school, Denzel, he said, forcing a smile as his fingers fidgeted with the cards on his lap. Times are changing, man. You can't deny that Denzel didn't lean back this time. He leaned forward. His voice, low and precise, carried that calm power that makes people forget to breathe. Old school, he repeated slowly. You say that like it's a bad thing? He held Michael's gaze, eyes steady, unblinking. Old school built the foundation you're standing on. Don't confuse new with better. Michael's grin faltered. You could see it, the crack in his television-perfect composure. The one thing every host fears, losing control of the room. I'm not saying you're irrelevant, Michael said quickly, trying to soften it, but the tone only made it worse. I just mean, people evolve, audiences change. Maybe the next generation doesn't connect with the same stories anymore. Denzel's eyebrows lifted slightly, the hint of a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Then maybe the next generation needs better stories, he said. The audience shifted. Some of them couldn't help but let out a quiet gasp. Michael's jaw clenched. You know, Denzel, he said, now visibly tense, you talk like you've got all the answers. But maybe people are just ready for something new. Denzel's smile disappeared. Maybe they are, he said softly. But let's not pretend you're one of them. The words hit Michael like a slap wrapped in silk. His posture stiffened. He forced another laugh, but this time it didn't even sound human. It was the sound of a man trying not to lose his grip on his image. Hosting, he said, tapping his chest, is a craft too, you know. Denzel tilted his head slightly, studying him. A craft? His tone was quiet, almost curious, but there was a dangerous edge underneath. Then tell me, Michael, when's the last time you risked anything for it? Michael blinked, thrown off. Excuse me? You heard me, Denzel said, eyes locked on him. When's the last time you actually put something on the line for this job? When's the last time you said something that wasn't approved, rehearsed, or safe? Michael stammered. Look, man, I show up here every morning. I put in the work. That's not work, Denzel interrupted, his tone sharp now. That's routine. Work is when you create something that outlives you. Routine is when you smile on cue and call it purpose. The audience let out a quiet ripple of murmurs. Michael's face flushed, and for the first time, his signature confidence looked like it was slipping away. He straightened in his chair, his smile gone completely. You're out of line, he muttered. Denzel leaned back, his voice cool and unshaken. No, I'm just being honest. And maybe honesty's what this show's been missing. Michael opened his mouth to reply, but nothing came out. Denzel's tone had shifted again. No longer defensive, no longer even angry. It was surgical. Each word was measured, deliberate, and sharp enough to draw blood without ever raising his voice. You question my right to be here, he said slowly, eyes locked on Michael. But you built your career off charm, not challenge. Michael's face hardened. His usual grin was gone now, replaced by something tighter, more human. That's not fair, he snapped. I've worked hard for this seat. Denzel leaned forward just enough for the cameras to catch the quiet fire in his eyes. Hard work doesn't always mean right work, Michael. Sometimes it just means staying comfortable. The words landed like a blow to the gut. You could see it in Michael's body language, the subtle shift, the tightening of his shoulders. It was the kind of reaction you only get when someone's hit too close to the truth. Michael tried to recover, forcing a dry laugh. You make it sound like I just showed up one day and got lucky. Denzel didn't laugh. Didn't you? He said, calm but merciless. You went from the field to the couch, from touchdowns to teleprompters. And now you're sitting here questioning me about relevance? His words weren't shouted. They were quiet, steady, and that made them hit even harder. You talk about new voices and fresh energy, but let's be honest, Michael. You're just another familiar face they use to keep people comfortable. Safe, predictable. Michael's lips parted, but no words came out. He looked away for a second, then back again, the defensiveness creeping in. You think you know me, Denzel? You don't. You don't know what I've had to prove to stay here. Denzel's reply was immediate. Then maybe you should start proving it to yourself first. The silence that followed wasn't like the others. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy. You could feel the tension hanging between them, a live current running through every second. Denzel leaned back slightly, but his voice dropped even lower now, intimate and cutting all at once. You ever notice, he said softly, how quick you are to talk about others and how slow you are to look at yourself? Michael blinked. For a brief moment, he didn't even breathe. The question hung in the air like a mirror no one wanted to face. Michael's hands trembled as he flipped through his cue cards again, but this time, he wasn't looking for questions. He was trying to hold on to control. The tension had built to a point where the air itself felt charged. His breathing quickened, his posture rigid, his eyes flashing with frustration. Finally, something inside him snapped. He slammed the note cards down on the desk with a sharp crack that echoed through the studio. You don't come on my show and disrespect me, he barked, his voice rising in anger. Denzel didn't flinch. He sat there for a beat, calm and unshaken, his gaze steady. Then, in a voice low enough to silence the room, he said, Your show? You're a temporary face on a permanent stage. The words cut through the noise like a blade. A few gasps rippled from the audience. Michael leaned forward, fists pressing against the table. You're out of line, he shot back, his voice cracking under the strain. Denzel shook his head slowly, his tone colder now. No, I'm out of patience. The room was electric now, the kind of silence that happens before something breaks. Michael's face was red, his breathing uneven. He looked like he was fighting two battles at once, one with Denzel and one with his own ego. You think you can come in here and talk down to me like I haven't earned this? He said, his voice trembling with fury. Denzel's reply came sharp and clean. Earned it? You said I'm hogging oxygen, Michael. You ever think maybe you're the one running out of breath trying to keep up? That landed hard. It wasn't a shout. It didn't need to be. It was a precision strike. You could see the fire in Michael's eyes flicker, then burn hotter. He shot up from his chair. Get out, he yelled, pointing toward the exit. Get the hell off my set. Denzel stood too, slowly, deliberately. The difference between them was striking. Michael was shaking with rage, his body tense, while Denzel moved like a man who'd already won. You don't dismiss me, Denzel said quietly. You expose yourself. Michael's jaw tightened, his voice shaking now. You've got some nerve. No, Denzel interrupted. I've got self-respect. There's a difference. The cameras stayed locked on them, capturing every second, the host unraveling, the guest standing firm. For a show built on smiles and soft questions, this was something no one had ever seen before. The illusion of control was gone, replaced by the raw truth of two men at war, one fighting to defend his image, the other fighting for his dignity. And in that moment, it was clear who the audience believed. Denzel rose from his chair with a steadiness that was almost unnerving. Every movement he made felt deliberate. The slow straightening of his jacket, the careful lift of his chin, the calm in his breathing. There was no shouting, no dramatic flair, just a quiet authority that immediately shifted the energy in the room. You invited me here to embarrass me, he said, his voice even, smooth but heavy enough to silence every whisper in the studio. But instead, you embarrassed yourself. Michael's jaw clenched so tightly the muscles in his face twitched. His fist pressed against the desk, the veins in his arms visible under the bright studio lights. "You think you can walk in here and talk to me like that?" he muttered through gritted teeth. Denzel's eyes didn't leave him. "I don't think it, Michael," he replied coldly. "I just did." He reached up and unhooked the microphone from his jacket. The sound of the tiny clip coming loose was louder than it should have been. A soft click that somehow carried more finality than words ever could. Denzel coiled the wire in his hand, slow, deliberate, methodical, as if each motion was a statement of control. Then he placed the mic on the chair beside him, not tossed, not dropped. Placed. A small, perfect act of defiance. A mic drop without noise, but with meaning that cut deeper than any outburst ever could. "There," he said, voice low. "You can have your stage back." The audience didn't clap. They didn't even breathe. It wasn't a performance anymore. It was a reckoning. Michael stared at him, chest heaving, anger and humiliation colliding behind his eyes. His polished TV mask was gone. What was left was raw, human frustration. "You think this makes you look strong?" he spat. "All it does is make you look bitter." Denzel didn't react. He simply tilted his head slightly, like a man studying a case that had already been closed. "You know what's dangerous, Michael?" he said, voice calm but sharp as glass. "When a man mistakes popularity for respect." Michael's face flushed darker. "I earn my respect every day," he snapped back, his tone desperate now. "Millions of people watch this show. They respect me." Denzel took a slow step forward, not threatening, but commanding. "No," he said quietly. "They recognize you." There's a difference. His words hit like a slap wrapped in truth. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it again, his voice caught somewhere between rage and disbelief. "Respect," Denzel continued, his tone like the steady hum of a warning, "isn't applause. It's restraint. It's knowing when to shut up and listen before you speak." He leaned forward slightly, eyes locked onto Michael's. "You've spent your whole career talking. Try learning how to hear something for once." For a moment, it felt like the entire studio tilted. Michael's breath caught, his lips trembled, his anger now mixed with something far more dangerous. Humiliation. He looked down at the floor, then back up, forcing a bitter laugh. "You done preaching?" he said, trying to sound defiant but failing miserably. Denzel exhaled softly, almost pitying him. "No," he said, "you are." The words hung in the air like the final gavel in a courtroom. Denzel gave one last glance toward the audience, his expression calm but cutting. "You wanted a headline," he said, turning slightly toward the exit. "Now you've got one." And as he began to walk away, the silence in the studio felt deafening. The cameras stayed on him, tracking his slow, deliberate steps. He didn't storm out. He departed. With every stride, he left behind an image that would replay across television screens for years. A man who didn't need to raise his voice to dominate a room, who dismantled arrogance with nothing but truth. Michael stood there, motionless, staring at the chair where Denzel had placed his mic. His breathing was shallow, his confidence gone. Around him, the bright lights that once made him shine now made him look exposed. Denzel's words echoed in his head like a sentence he couldn't appeal. "Respect isn't applause. It's restraint." And as the doors closed behind Denzel Washington, Michael Strahan realized the only thing louder than Denzel's calm was his silence. Denzel paused before leaving the stage, his back half turned to Michael, the silence hanging thick in the air. The audience didn't know if they should clap, breathe, or look away. Every eye in the room was fixed on him, waiting for what he would say next. When Denzel finally spoke, his tone was calm but heavy with truth. The kind that lands deep and doesn't fade. "You could have talked about legacy," he said, his eyes locked on Michael. "You could have asked about lessons, about growth, about what it means to still care about the work after all these years." His words came slow, deliberate, each one cutting through the bright studio air like a verdict. "But you didn't want truth. You wanted a clip. You wanted clicks. You wanted to stir something up so your numbers would look good in the morning." "Well, congratulations, Michael," he said, his voice dropping lower, colder. Now you've got both, and you lost your dignity in the process. Michael stood frozen, every part of his carefully built persona crumbling under the weight of those words. His eyes darted toward the cameras, then to the producers off stage, desperate for someone to save him, but no one moved. It wasn't a show anymore. It was judgment, live and unedited. Denzel didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply looked at Michael for a long moment, then took a slow, steady breath. "You know what's funny?" he said quietly, almost to himself. "You call this Good Morning America, but there's nothing good about humiliating someone who came here in good faith." Michael swallowed hard, trying to find a response, but the words wouldn't come. The only thing louder than Denzel's voice was the silence that followed it. Denzel reached up and adjusted his jacket collar, that familiar gesture of composure returning as he prepared to leave. "I'll leave," he said finally, voice calm, certain, unwavering. "Not because you said so, but because I still know what grace looks like." He turned toward the exit, his stride smooth and deliberate. Each step he took echoed in the studio like a heartbeat, steady and powerful. No music, no applause, just that sound. The quiet rhythm of a man walking away on his own terms. Michael's eyes followed him, a mix of anger and disbelief flooding his expression. He looked like someone who had just realized too late that he'd picked the wrong fight. Denzel didn't look back, didn't break stride. The camera followed him as he passed through the set lights, his shadow stretching behind him. A silent reminder that sometimes the loudest moment in television isn't a shout, but a walk. When the studio doors closed behind him, the sound felt final, like the end of something much bigger than an interview. Michael stood alone now, surrounded by the glare of his own stage lights, the applause that never came, and the truth that everyone had seen. Denzel hadn't just walked out, he'd taken the last word, and with it, every ounce of power the host thought he had. For a few endless seconds, the studio existed in complete silence. The cameras were still rolling, the lights still blazing, but the air had gone dead. Michael stood rooted in place, his face drained of color, his expression locked somewhere between disbelief and humiliation. His lips moved slightly, but no words came out. The man who made a career out of talking suddenly had nothing left to say. He glanced around the studio, the audience, the crew, the camera operators, all of them frozen, all of them silently absorbing what they had just witnessed. You could almost feel the collective pulse of the room drop. It wasn't awe, it wasn't respect. It was the quiet recognition that something irreversible had just happened. The teleprompter kept rolling as if the show could somehow continue, but Michael couldn't move. His cue cards lay scattered on the desk, his carefully rehearsed smile gone. He blinked a few times, trying to summon that TV host confidence, the quick recovery, the fake laugh, the pivot to the next topic. But it wouldn't come. The words stuck in his throat like stones. One of the producers off stage made a small, frantic hand gesture, signaling for a commercial break. But even that seemed pointless. The damage was already done. For the first time in his career, Michael Strahan wasn't just speechless. He was defeated, and the whole world was watching. The audience didn't clap when the segment finally cut to black. No one dared. Some people stared down at their phones, pretending not to look. Others sat perfectly still, processing the wreckage of what was supposed to be a cheerful morning interview. Offstage, a sound technician's headset crackled with static before someone whispered, "Keep rolling. Don't cut." It was the kind of moment producers dream of and hosts dread. A train wreck in slow motion, beautiful only because it was real. Backstage, a crew member replayed the last few moments on a monitor, the clip already being clipped, saved, and shared. Denzel's final line echoed through the control room like a haunting refrain. "I hope no one ever tells you to quit what you love, because even fools deserve a chance to grow." It wasn't said with malice, but with a strange mercy, the kind that burns worse than anger because it's true. Those words replayed again and again, looping through the stunned silence like a confession nobody wanted to admit. In the studio, Michael slowly sat down, still staring at the empty chair across from him. His reflection stared back from the glossy desk surface. The confident host replaced by a man who had just been stripped bare, on live television. No crowd noise, no applause, no recovery line could save the moment. Denzel was gone, but his presence still filled the space like a shadow that refused to fade. And as the lights dimmed and the cameras finally stopped rolling, one truth settled over the room. Sometimes the loudest thing on television isn't a voice raised in anger. It's the silence left behind when dignity walks out the door. Within hours, the clip exploded across every platform imaginable. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all flooded with the same footage. Denzel Washington standing tall under the harsh studio lights, calm, collected, unshaken, while Michael Strahan unraveled in real time. The moment spread like wildfire. News anchors replayed it between segments. Reaction videos piled up by the thousands. Hashtags like hashtag Denzel walks out and hashtag respect over ratings began trending before the morning show had even ended. But beneath all the noise, beneath the endless memes, think pieces, and hot takes, one truth began to settle into the collective mind of anyone who watched. Respect isn't demanded. It's earned. It's defended. And once it's truly earned, it's remembered. People didn't see a celebrity tantrum that morning. They saw a lesson in control. Denzel's calm, almost surgical composure became the benchmark for grace under pressure. His refusal to shout, to stoop, to break character, turned what could have been a media disaster into something closer to legend. Every pause, every glance, every perfectly chosen word was studied, quoted, and clipped into motivational videos within hours. Across talk shows, journalists debated who was right, who was wrong, but the audience had already decided. One man stood for ego, the other stood for dignity. Meanwhile, Michael's meltdown became the kind of cautionary tale that lives forever in television folklore. The morning host who once thrived on effortless charm was now the face of arrogance exposed. Producers whispered about the outburst behind closed doors, executives panicked about damage control, and PR teams scrambled to spin the narrative. But the internet had already written the ending for them. Michael's face, red, trembling, cornered, became a warning. In the age of viral truth, one moment of disrespect can erase years of image building. Denzel, on the other hand, didn't comment. He didn't issue a statement, didn't tweet, didn't do a follow-up interview. He didn't need to. His silence spoke louder than any response could. Every replay of that moment only reinforced the same idea. This wasn't just a walkout. It was a masterclass in dignity under fire. The image of him removing his microphone, setting it gently on the chair, and walking off without looking back became one of those cultural snapshots people never forget. The kind that defines a career, a message, a legacy. By nightfall, clips of that slow, deliberate walk had been edited into highlight reels set to music. Commentators called it the most powerful silence in television history. Fans quoted his line, "Popularity isn't respect," as if it were gospel. And somewhere behind all the screens and headlines, the world collectively understood what Denzel Washington had just proven. That real power doesn't come from applause. It comes from restraint. When the noise finally died down, and the endless chatter faded into memory, one truth remained suspended in the echo of that day. Michael had spoken the loudest, but Denzel had said everything. If this moment shook you the way it shook millions watching live, don't just scroll. Hit subscribe now and join us as we uncover the truth behind the world's most explosive on-air confrontations. Stay tuned because the next story will make this one look tame.